my name is Miss Jacobs. I am a teacher at Tanglewood Middle School for ELA 6th grade. And today I'm going to be demonstrating the next chapter of Seed Folks, connecting to text and identifying the author's purpose. This is going to be our focus for chapter 7, which is Virgil. You will need a pen or a pencil, something to write with, a highlighter to identify passages in the text. And the text we will be covering today are 6.9a, which is to explain the author's purpose and message within the text. 6.5e, which is making connections to personal experiences, ideas in the text, and society. And the final TEK that we're covering today is 6.5f, making inferences and using evidence to support understanding. You'll notice the inferencing comes up quite a bit in these videos. When we infer, we are reading between the lines. We are taking information and making conclusions, deducing information, using logic based on evidence. So this is a life skill, not just for reading. We are constantly making inferences, whether we realize it or not, based on the movies we watched and the characters we see and what they do. So you can also make inferences when you read literature, which is what we're going to be working on today with Seed Folks by Paul Fleischman. So let's begin. All right, we're going to start with our warm-up. And here we have a gorilla. In this warm-up, I want you to think about a time when you wanted something so badly. You really, really wanted something. Could be a situation. Maybe you wanted to visit your grandmother, but maybe it was an object that you really wanted. Maybe it was a toy you really wanted. So think about a time when you really wanted something very badly. I wonder what our gorilla is thinking. What did you want? Did you have a plan for getting this thing or situation? If so, what was that plan? How did it work out? So take time to think about that. And as always, if you run out of time and we move forward before you've had a chance to write down your answer, you can always go back. This is available on Houston Home TV, Houston ISD's Home TV. So know that it is recorded for you. Okay, moving right along. So as I said earlier, we're going to meet Virgil, who is the protagonist, the main character in chapter 7 of Seed Folks. Again, as was the case in the previous 6 chapters, Virgil is going to be writing, or speaking rather, in first person POV. POV is an acronym for point of view. So Virgil is one of the characters, and when we study the 7th chapter here, keep in mind it's first person point of view. We don't know who Virgil is yet, so let's read along. My father, he always has a smile on his face and a plan moving in his head. We were standing together on the sidewalk while the men were cleaning the lot. I was watching the rats running for their lives. They were shooting off every which way. A couple of dealers came over, the ones always bragging about how bad they are. A rat ran right up one of their legs. The dude screamed, just like a woman would do with a mouse in cartoons, only louder. Shook his leg like his toe was being electrocuted. That rat flew off and dove down a storm drain. I looked at my father. That's when I saw that he hadn't paid the rat any mind, hadn't even turned his head. His eyes were stuck completely on the garden land being uncovered. He had a 2-foot smile he had a 2-foot wide smile on his face. So your activity is going to be number 1, identify the figurative device highlighted in yellow. So let's do that first. He had a 2-foot wide smile on his face. So this is the boy's father, who is actually Virgil. So Virgil, the father, had a 2-foot wide smile on his face. Now, that's quite an exaggeration. We can very much doubt that his father really had a smile that was 2 feet wide. So when we talk about a figurative device utilizing this idea of exaggeration, we're referring to hyperbole. If you said hyperbole or you wrote it down, excellent work. That is the figurative device identified there, hyperbole. And the prefix hyper means over. So hyperbole, it makes sense that hyperbole means exaggeration. When we think of hyperventilating, that means we are over breathing. Someone is hyperactive, they are overly active. So hyperbole, using that prefix, can really help us. Hyper means over, so hyperbole is an exaggeration. So let's look at number 2. The second activity is to give a trait to describe Virgil. Why? So I'm going to read this again. This time, pay attention to what potential trait you would give to describe Virgil and be prepared to give a reason. My father, Virgil. My father, he always has a smile on his face and a plan moving in his head. We were standing together on the sidewalk while the men were clearing the lot. I was watching the rats running for their lives. They were shooting off every which way. A couple of dealers came over, the ones always bragging about how bad they are. A rat ran right up one of their legs. The dude screamed, just like women do with a mouse in cartoons, only louder. Shook his leg like his toe was being electrocuted. That rat flew off and dove down a storm drain. I looked at my father. That's when I saw that he hadn't paid the rat any mind, hadn't even turned his head. His eyes were stuck completely on the garden land being uncovered. He had a 2-foot wide smile on his face. So you have these boys that are tough guys, and irony of ironies, when a rat comes, they get scared. And the father remains calm through the whole thing, has no reaction to the rats coming by. What can you infer? What trait would you give Virgil, knowing rats can come by him, they might go up his legs, and he's cool. He doesn't react. So maybe a calm personality, very laid back, confident. So there's more than one trait, obviously, but be prepared to defend the trait that you attribute to Virgil. Moving right along. A fact-finding mission, throwing in a little bit of alliteration there, fact-finding. A fact-finding, so the repetition of sounds at the beginning of words is alliteration. The repetition of sounds, not letters, the repetition of sounds at the beginning of words is a figurative term known as alliteration. So our activity, I'm going to move here, is to highlight words that give you information about the father, about Virgil. And I want you to circle words that provide information about the boy, Virgil's son. And I give 2 examples here, so we'll go back and look at that together. My father drove a bus back in Haiti. Here, so here is Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio. Let's take it again. My father drove a bus back in Haiti. Here, he drives a taxi. That night, he drove himself way across town to borrow 2 shovels from a friend of his. The next morning was the first day without school. I was done with 5th grade forever. I'd planned on sleeping till noon to celebrate, but when it was still half dark, my father shook my shoulder. School was over, but that garden was just starting. We walked down and picked out a place to dig up. The ground was packed so hard, the tip of my shovel bounced off it like a pogo stick. We tried 3 spots till we found one we liked. Then we walked back and forth, picking out broken glass like chickens pecking seeds. After that, we turned the soil. We were always digging up more trash bolts and screws and pieces of brick. That's how I found the locket. It was shaped like a heart and covered with rust, with a broken chain. I got it open. Inside was this tiny photo of a girl. She was white, with a sad-looking face. She had on this hat with flowers on it. I don't know why I kept it instead of tossing it on our trash pile. So our fact-finding mission begins with an example of information about the father. So right away, I highlighted my father drove a bus back in Haiti. So Virgil, there's 2 facts in there. In the past, he was a bus driver, but we also learned he lived in Haiti. Maybe he's Haitian. That we don't know. We could infer that Virgil is Haitian, but we don't have the fact that he's Haitian. In other words, he could have lived in Haiti for years, but perhaps he is not a native or from Haiti. But we do know that Virgil did at one point drive a bus, and he did so back in Haiti. So now your job is to find another fact and highlight a fact about the father. Then I want you to circle words that provide information about the boy. So here I've circled, that's how I found the locket, because obviously the I is referring to the boy. The boy found the locket while they were getting the ground ready in the lot in this area of Cleveland. The same area that Kim started this whole thing with when she planted those lima beans in honor of the father she never knew. So here's another fact. I was done with 5th grade forever, so you might want to circle that. That tells us that the boy is going into 6th grade. So any of you who are listening, you might be able to relate to that. This text is great for 6th, 7th, or 8th graders. So I highly recommend it, not just reading along with us, but getting yourself a copy. Okay, here we go. We're going to make predictions. Now, the prefix, we talked about the prefix hyper. Hyper means over, right? As we discussed before. The prefix pre means before. So we're making predictions. In Spanish, dice means speak, to speak. So when we make predictions, we are speaking, dice, right? We're making predictions. We're speaking, we're saying things that will happen before they occur. So you want to get in that habit of analyzing the structure of words so that when you come upon a word you don't know, you can deduce what the word means based on your previous knowledge. So we know pre means before, dice means speak. So predictions are speaking about something before it actually occurs. So what will happen next? I want you to highlight parts of the text that help you infer what will occur. A good author like Paul Fleischman does just that. He allows you, the reader, the pleasure of inferring information based on little hints, little foreshadowing hints that help you draw conclusions about what's coming next. So I want you to highlight words or phrases in this paragraph that help you infer a prediction. This is still Virgil's son speaking. It seemed like hours and hours before we had the ground finished. We rested a while. Then my father asked if I was ready. I thought he meant ready to plant our seeds, but instead we turned another square of ground, then another after that. Then 3 more after that. My father hadn't been smiling to himself about some little garden. He was thinking of a farm to make money. I'd seen a package of seeds for pole beans ad, hope that's what we grow. They get so tall that the man in the picture was picking way at the top of a ladder. But my father said no. He was always asking people in his cab about how to get rich. One of them told him that fancy restaurants paid lots of money for this baby lettuce, smaller than the regular kind, to use in rich folks' salads. The fresher it was, the higher the price. My father planned to pick it and then race it right over in his cab, running red lights if we had to. So we know the father is very interested in making money off of these seeds that will produce what we hope will be baby lettuce to sell to restaurants and make a profit on that. What can you infer based on his plan? Will it be successful? Will it be unsuccessful? And what words in this text help you figure it out? Highlight, highlight, highlight. He's definitely smiling to himself about the garden. Can you infer that's a good thing, that it will work out well? Or do you think Paul Fleischman, the author, is setting us up for a problem? Okay, the power of figurative language, simile. I'm moving my screen. The activity I want you to do here is highlighting again, but here we're highlighting the simile in the following section. What 2 things are being compared? So I want you to find the simile and then be clear, annotate next to the highlighted words or phrases, what 2 things are being compared. That lettuce was like having a new baby in the family, and I was like its mom. I watered it in the morning if my father was still out driving. It was supposed to come up in 7 days, but it didn't. My father couldn't figure out why. Neither of us knew anything about plants. This wrinkled old man in a straw hat tried to show me something when I poured out the water. He spoke some language, but it sure wasn't English. I didn't get what he was babbling about till the lettuce finally came up in wavy lines and bunches instead of straight rows. I'd washed the seeds out of their place. The minute it came up, it started to wilt. It was like a baby, always crying for its milk. I got sick of hauling bottles of water in our shopping cart like I was some old lady. Then the heat came. The leaves shriveled up. Some turned yellow. That lettuce was dying. So if you made a prediction that the lettuce would not be successful, you were correct. When we consider similes, there are, I think, at least 3 similes found in these 2 paragraphs. So I'm just asking you to pick one simile and find the comparison. What 2 things are being compared? So I'm just going to take this first one. If I were to highlight it, that would be correct. That is a simile. That lettuce was like having a new baby in the family. So it's a simile because you're comparing the lettuce to a new baby. What do they have in common? They both need a lot of attention, a lot of time devoted to it. It being the lettuce, the baby in the second case. But there are other similes throughout. So take some time to highlight the similes that you are finding, but then annotate what 2 things are being compared using like or as. to create that simile. Virgil's son seems to really like speaking in similes. If you go through this short chapter, you'll see several examples. And he even goes on to extend that simile. It was like a baby, always crying for its milk. Just like a baby cries for its milk, the lettuce is crying for more water. Again, you can go back to this at any time on Houston Home TV. And finally for today, we're going to focus on connecting through illustrations. I want you to draw a picture to visualize, I want you to draw a picture to visualize what occurs in the text in these two paragraphs. So before we get into the detail of that, I'm going to read it to you. As I read it to you, I want you to picture in your mind what is happening, because after, again, you're going to draw a picture to demonstrate what you visualize. My father practically cried looking at it. It is referring to the wilted, dying lettuce. Remember, the father wanted to make a lot of money, and he thought he could do it making the lettuce grow, and it didn't happen. Hence the crying. My father practically cried looking at it. He'd stop by in his cab when he could. He would tow a 5-gallon water container, riding in the back instead of passengers. Then bugs started eating big holes in the plants. I couldn't see anyone buying them from us. My father had promised we'd make enough money to buy me an 18-speed bike. I was counting on it. I'd already told my friends. My father asked all his passengers what to do. His cab was like a library for him. Finally, one of them told him that spring or fall was the time to grow lettuce, that the summer was too hot for it. My father wasn't smiling when he told us. I couldn't believe it. I stomped outside. I could feel that 18-speed bike slipping away. I was used to seeing kids lying and making mistakes, but not grown-ups. I was mad at my father. Then I sort of felt sorry for him. So I want you to draw a picture to visualize what occurred in those two paragraphs that I just read. Illustrate the expression on Virgil's face, that's the dad's face. Show the expression, how does he feel? Show that emotion. Illustrate the expression on the son's face, the boy's face. What else needs to go in the picture? Perhaps you want to include this vision of a bike that Virgil's son wanted and was hoping to get because of the profit from the small lettuce. And maybe that 18-speed bike is floating in the sky, unattainable, unable for Virgil's son to get. It's just a pipe dream at this point and not an actual thing, a tangible thing that's going to happen for him. Maybe you want to do an illustration of the father asking his customers, his taxi customers, what he needs to do to get his lettuce to grow. Maybe you see the expression on the taxis, not the taxis, but the passengers in the taxi. Maybe you're seeing their reaction. So there's a lot to consider. The water that he keeps in the back of the taxi as he runs back and forth between customers and taking care of the lettuce that keeps wilting. Maybe you want to do an illustration including the wilted lettuce with the holes in it from the bugs eating it. So there's a lot to do there. That is all for today. Again, my name is Miss Jacobs. I am a middle school teacher at Tanglewood Middle School, and I want to thank you for joining us on this journey and delving into the world of seed folks.